know that Malbec is one half-sibling to Merlot? Because Malbec's mum, Magdalene Noire des Charentes, is also one parent to the cultivar of Merlot. Merlot's father, of course, is Cabernet Franc, a wild and randy old knave who parented a number of cultivars, including Carmenere and Cabernet Sauvignon. And the relevance of all this is that today's Hand Drink Soda Wine info video is really some sort of multi-generational extended family blend of Malbec and Cabernet Franc, put together by winemaker JD Russouw and his team at Wildeberg. Wildeberg have made their home on the very southern end of the Franschoek Valley in a really premium little stretch of elevated vineyards that I call Franschoek Southern Rim. This little subregion, which includes the Boerhoek, is home to producers like Bukkenhoutskloof, Haut Espoir, Stony Brook, as well as the now world-famous La Colline Old Vine vineyards, which provide fruit for producers like Damascene and Alheit wines. The Wildeberg Coterie Cabernet Franc Malbec blend is a mix of 60% Cabernet Franc and 40% Malbec. For the Coterie range, the Wildeberg team sourced fruit from a number of pockets around the Cape Winelands, and for this wine, all the fruit comes from either Franschoek or Paarl. Now, when one hears of regions like Franschoek and Paarl, the first association that pops up is often those of big, rich, ripe wines. And this is mostly because both these regions can get quite warm in the summer, bringing maximum ripeness to the fruit. What's more, warm climate Malbec is known for its inky, thick, concentrated black fruit. And even in the cooler French climate of Cahors, Malbec was known and renowned for once delivering the black wines of Cahors due to its super rich color. And what of the Cabernet Franc in the blend? Well, we know that Cabernet Franc is medium-bodied and often more known for its red fruits and herbs and florals, especially in the cooler climates like the Loire in France. But warmer climate Cabernet can get really quite jammy, delivering higher alcohols and ripe blue fruit, especially in regions like Franschoek or Paarl. And finally, to add one more little bit of relevant information, when we check the label on the bottle, we see an alcohol level of 14.5%. And so any half-decent wine sleuth would assume that she was in for a huge blockbuster of a wine. But when we get into the glass and taste this wine, you'll see that winemaker JD Russouw has managed to deliver something remarkably different to what one's expectations might have predicted. When we give this guy a sniff, we are surprisingly met by a rather serious nose that blends a little bit of fruit with quite a lot of herbs. On the fruit side of things, we do get black currant and some richer, sweeter black plum, but then we also get far more vibrant notes of raspberry and red cherry. On the herb side, we get a delightful fennel note and also a kind of sweet, slightly grassy heather element, finished off quite nicely with the more typical Cabernet Franc-esque violet florals. And finally, as a very subtle framing to all the primary stuff that's going on, there is a hint of oak spice to it in the form of notes of cocoa dust and some vanilla spice. And when we get to giving this guy a sip, well, it's perhaps here that our preconceptions of the wine are defied most comprehensively, because the acidity on this is really quite pronounced. Or perhaps another way of putting it is that those red fruit notes, the brighter, juicier cherry and raspberry, race out the gate to you. But then those riper black fruit notes of black currant and plum do slowly catch up and restore a sense of balance. As we move into the finish, we find the black fruit retiring a little more quickly, and what lingers are those notes of cherry and raspberry once again. These are of course kept company by those herbal elements on the end, a slightly bitter fennel note and more of that heather that we described on the aromas. So how does JD Russouw take Malbec and Cabernet Franc from warm climates with high alcohol and manage to produce a wine that is anything less than a big, ripe color and fruit bomb? Well, perhaps the first key lies in the fact that all the fruit is fermented as whole bunch. There's absolutely no crushing prior to fermentation. This means that the extraction levels of both color and tannin will be slightly lower. And some of you might say, but hang on, I thought if we added stems, we're adding tannins in there. And this is true, but generally with whole bunch fermentation, the overall more gentle winemaking style overrides any additional tannins that might be added by the stems. What the stems will add is a sense of herbal green rocket leaf spice, and we do pick up some of that in this wine. Another element that may have had an influence is that JD Russouw relies purely on native yeasts or spontaneous fermentation, and so there are none of those super yeasts that might encourage or increase the extraction of anthocyanins into the final wine. Finally, the oak regimen is also fairly gentle because the team uses slightly larger 300-liter barrels, which obviously reduces the ratio of oak surface to wine. And then once the 20-month maturation process is completed, the wine is coarse filtered before bottling. Now, we can talk about the difference between fine filtered and coarse filtered on another day because that's all we have time for today. So if you have any questions, leave them on the site and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And if you enjoyed the video, then support us on Patreon and subscribe to the Hand Drink Solo YouTube channel because we publish at least 6 videos every single month where we talk about wine science, wine history, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars coming out of the dynamic South African wine.